Melanoma is one of the most common cancers in Australia. 1,500 people a year die from melanoma in Australia, and we have the highest rates of melanoma in the world. We've gone from understanding quite a lot about what goes wrong in a cell to make it into a melanoma, but not being able to utilise that for treatments for patients. We've been able to turn that knowledge, which has moved very fast now, into some remarkable new treatments that can kill melanoma cells.
As a genetic counsellor, I often use the analogy of a gene being like a chapter in a book, and sometimes there's a typo in there, and those genes are arranged into chromosomes, which are sort of like the volumes of encyclopedia. And I guess what the Melbourne Genomics Health Alliance is a little bit doing, like the work that is happening within the Alliance, in some ways is more like the work of a librarian, where we are stocking the shelves, trying to make sure that when people come into the library, the clinicians come in, they're able to select the volume that they need and find the information they need to then go away and use that. And what we're trying to do is have a well-curated library that clinicians can find that information easily on as many of their patients as will benefit as possible.
So that approach is a beautiful mix with my interest, which is to find these genes, these key drivers that make cancer cells grow, and then be able to target them. So bringing together the efforts of genomics, where one understands all the genes that go wrong within a cancer, and then working out how to treat it, is something which Clara and I are very much working on.
So I discovered that I had cancer from a small lump under my armpit. It began to grow, and it began to grow very, very rapidly.
So when we started to come up with the idea of targeting one gene, the BRAF oncogene, for treating melanoma, this was an international effort. And one of my colleagues in Los Angeles had been treating a young man, Chris Gordon, from New Zealand with an immune treatment. And unfortunately, this didn't help Chris. And my colleague in Los Angeles, Tony Rebas, who I was working on developing these new ideas for targeting the BRAF oncogene, said to Chris, "Why don't you go and see Grant in Melbourne? We have this new treatment emerging that you might be interested in." So Chris came across from Auckland to Melbourne, where we had this very innovative new trial to target the BRAF oncogene.
Grant MacArthur pulled me aside and said, "I've got something I'd like to show you." And he hadn't said anything else about how the drug had been working to that point. Took me into his office and showed me a scan that I'd had the first scan and then the new scan 2 weeks later. And with the first scan, he showed me I had a tumour probably about that big, I guess, about the size of an orange. And then 2 weeks later, he showed me the same tumour that had really shrunk to sort of, from memory, about this big. And that was in 2 weeks. So it was absolutely incredible.
And now, over 6 years ago, Chris started treatment for advanced melanoma that we consider incurable. He started on the BRAF inhibitor and had a dramatic response. The disease has continued under complete control.
We've moved in recent years from a genetic era, looking at one gene at a time, to the genomic era, where it's possible to look at every gene in the genome, or a subset of those genes that are known to cause genetic conditions.
General practitioners are going to become major players in personalised healthcare. And this is why it's very important at universities that we build these cross-disciplinary teams between leading scientists and general practitioners at the coalface of healthcare. And that's something that you can do at a university. At the end of the day, we don't want any patient left behind. We want every patient really in the world to get the advantage of the research that's happening here at the University of Melbourne.